So welcome, Eileen O'Grady. I'm sorry, Doctor.
Thank you, Wendy.
Welcome, Dr. Eileen O'Grady. How are you today? We're so excited to have you on the podcast.
Great to be here. I love your work, Wendy. I'm a huge fan of the podcast. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So let's just start off by you telling our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I've been wanting to be a nurse since I was 11 and, was working as an RN at 19 and, have a doctorate in nursing, a master's in public health and a master's in nursing. So I like to think that, my education was my favorite mistake. And I'm always telling people to go, it's great to be educated, but to sort of go straight through, like just the quickest, easiest way possible. When you look at other professions, like a law degree, it's undergrad 3 years. And in nursing, we tend to just, go on and make it a long process. So my favorite mistake is all the education I have. I'm a nurse practitioner. I have been since I was about 22. And, just working in primary care, Wendy, I just found that, my only tool was a hammer and everybody was coming in. And what was making them sick was what they were doing in between office visits, on the couch, and what's on their fork, whatever it was. And I just felt like I couldn't keep writing these prescriptions. It didn't feel right to me. So at midlife, I had a big crisis and rebuilt my life really from the bottom up. And I've held on firmly. And at my core, I am a nurse practitioner. I'm a nurse. That's who I am. That's how I approach things. But I did go back and become a certified coach, and that really changed. It gave me a lot more skills and tools to talk to people in a different way. So I run the School of Wellness, where we work with people to overcome self-defeating behaviors. We go into lots of organizations, especially healthcare, and talk about creating a culture of wellness and how can we not get sick while we're providing care to people, because people are in crisis right now.
This is such a great time to be doing the work that we're doing, right? Because we do very similar work, which is, there's enough work out there for everyone, just especially with the nursing shortage crisis and healthcare professionals in general are in crisis, especially with, COVID-19. And I always say this, it's not new, right? Stress, burnout, not taking care of ourselves. It's not new. It's just amplified now because, now we have this other threat, which is, the pandemic. And now it's televised and media, so everyone's aware of it now. But you and I, like many of our listeners, have experienced it for years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
the sclerotic and ossified healthcare system that is not nimble, and there's not a real eye towards the well-being of the health workforce. So luckily, maybe we could do a rebuild and think about how do we work in these systems in a more humane way and treat people more humanely that are working in them.
Yeah, and I want to unpack that a little more. Where do you think we would start with something like that, restructuring the healthcare system?
Well, because I often work with the C-suite, the people in charge, but I really think it starts with ourselves and how we go about and carry ourselves. Like we have a lot of agency that I think we leave on the table about our own self-care. And people, I don't want anyone to roll their eyes when you hear this, but I think we have to really take command and control of the things we have control over, which is how we treat our bodies, what we let in, and that means media, people, energy of other people, what we let out, how we show up, So I like to think of bedrock behaviors as these things that we do almost on the daily that we're not negotiating with anybody about, but particularly ourselves, built on a foundation of sleep. Are we moving our bodies in a way that nourishes our human bodies need to move? Are we eating real food? Do we have good social contacts? Are we doing some kind of brain health activity like brief meditation, prayer, whatever it is to get quiet and still so we can access our wisdom? So when we're not doing these things, there's no wisdom in it. And we're not, you can't give what you don't have. So I think it really starts with, if we want to create a culture of wellness on our healthcare team, it starts with how we show up. Are we fed, watered, and rested? And are we asking about the well-being of our teammates? Or are we in a gossip culture? Are we taking other people down? are we showing some care and concern to other people as well? Because we can't give it if we don't have it ourselves.
Yeah, and I always challenge healthcare leaders to assess stress, wellness, or mental health of their employees, which is not something that is on your goals and objectives that you do on a quarterly basis, right? So I just received the email, to do my GNOs. There's nothing on there about wellness. There's nothing on there about mental health, but especially our healthcare providers at the bedside during this time. Who's assessing their well-being? Right. So we know self-care is one thing, right? But I think it's a responsibility of healthcare leaders also, because you're just as good as your team. If your team is stressed, burned out, and we both know that having a healthcare team that is stressed and burned out leads to safety issues, right? Med errors, even death. There's research on that. So it's important that we take ownership as healthcare leaders to assess our people, and also have the resources for them. So I know many institutions have wellness programs. They have different things they're doing, but it's like one and done, or, oh, you just have to schedule this appointment. But it has to be a daily thing we are talking about and addressing and normalizing. PTSD is on the rise.
Yeah.
As you know. And I think I was just sharing with you before we started this interview, I've been sick for probably a little over a week. And laying in my bed, all I could think about is that self-care is important because of this time right now, being in the bed by myself, and I can't get up. I can't align with my purpose. I can't have impact because my health, right? So health and self-care, I want to call it like healthcare, right? Self-care, it all aligns, but I think sometimes it's so hard for us to see that when we're well, when things are going really good, right? So how do we help healthcare providers see the importance of healthcare? Self-care is really the foundation to healthcare. Because, I think everyone kind of poo-poos self-care, right? Everybody's talking about self-care, wellness, but it is a thing. It's a real thing that is needed. But how do you think we can change the language so it really infiltrates the individuals who need to practice it?
Yeah, well, I think we could take our cues from Simone Biles. I mean, look what she did to protect her health. She said no, and maybe we need to say no more. That's for sure. And we get to design our life. Like, we went into nursing so that we could accompany people through difficult experiences. At the core, that we stepped forward and said, yes, I want to do this. Most people don't sign up for that. So we are made special and have this unique ability to bring science and caring and join the two together. And so that culture of, like, we just keep working until we drop. I mean, that's part of our educational process. So my dream, Wendy, would be to get a hold of PE class in K through 12 and actually completely revamp that and start teaching the tenets of positive psychology. And how do we actually form habits? What is the science? And have students keep journals and learn how to design their ideal life so that they don't host a chronic illness. So we didn't go into healthcare to help other people to get sick and to be sicker than the general population. And as you said, it's the real tragedy here is that our health status has always been worse than the general population. Higher levels of stress and obesity and all of those things. And I think that should be flipped completely. So it just starts with command and control of ourselves and what we are doing, and what we're going to say no to, what we're going to say yes to, and how we show up. And if you're in a situation where you can't get those basic physical needs met for whatever reason, working crazy hours or whatever that is, you can say no. You might need to look for a different position so that you don't get sick doing this job, that we have to protect ourselves first. So that's first and foremost.
Yeah, and that's one thing I work with the nurses who I work with in the nurse wellness mentorship. I work with them on really feeling empowered. Because I think when you're stressed, you're burnt out, you lose that sense of power. And nurses are so powerful. And the reason I do the work that I do is because I know how powerful nurses are. I know the changes they can make. I know the impact they can have. But when you're stressed and you're burnt out, you're not performing at your optimal level, right? So people always say, what do nurses want? ask them. They'll tell you and they'll give you the plan and the roadmap, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I like what you're saying about going back to, even elementary school and talking to those kids and instilling it there. Because even for me now, I'm in the nursing school, like schools of nursing, talking about this. As you know, we're in crisis and we don't really have the infrastructure to support these new nurses coming out.
Yeah,
So
and also like when we see somebody, we've noticed an uptick in incivility out in public, right? We all have, certainly in healthcare. And so when we see somebody discharging their distress onto other people, because that's basically what it is, we can learn to not match them, actually. They're in distress, and we can be much more skillful about what's going on with this person instead of matching them. And that's what's sort of happening because we are so depleted. So if we really want to be healing agents in this world, we've got to be fed and watered and rested. I mean, it's so basic. We just cannot go into these work environments depleted in any way. We just can't. And that's all I have to say on that, really. I mean, we don't, and even kids in high school and in grade school, they don't have any skills on human psychology and how we work and how to deal with a bully and how to not take things personally. That is a skill set that we can learn to say, this person, this has nothing to do with me, whatever this person is doing or saying, and not get all reactive. And so I love the idea of us getting like sort of modernizing our skill sets.
yes, yes. And it really is like, your book, Choosing Wellness. I think the word choosing, it's a choice. So what choices are we making in our lives? And I want to get into this book. You tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write this wonderful book.
Well, it was a hard thing for sure because it's very personal. And I want to just say that anyone listening, like when your company or health system says, oh, we're going to do a resiliency program, I often feel like it's code for, we want you to do more with less, and that's not what this is about, but it's really a very personal journey into my own swan dive into a very dark place as a nurse, not doing any of the things I was telling my patients to do. And so for me, it was this kind of lack of integrity that I had. I felt like I had no business telling people what to eat or how to move their bodies when I wasn't doing it myself. So I really feel like we could get in alignment with what our business is in healthcare. We're talking about it from morning until night, all day long, that we're pursuing it ourselves. So it's my own personal story about going from a really unhealthy person, lots of trauma in my background, and kind of finding a way out of that. And I believe that people are being traumatized by working in healthcare right now. I mean, it's just so painful and difficult to watch. So we have to start treating trauma like appendicitis. That oftentimes people will think that they have many problems, that they ruminate and they drink too much and they're eating too much sugar and all that, but they may just have one problem, which is unresolved trauma, unrecognized, unprocessed trauma.
Yes, treating trauma. But in order to treat it, you have to acknowledge it, right? And I think that's the whole thing, like, people slowing down to figure out what is going on with me. And I think that's the hardest thing because people have past traumas that, things that they're experiencing now, it's bringing that up. So it's more trauma and just more trauma.
Right. Getting compounded, right.
Yeah. So that is, wow. Yeah.
And
And I
so a
think
lot of the book is about, know thyself. Like I had to just start getting quiet and like figuring out even what I needed. Like if I was cold, do I need a sweater? I didn't know when I was hungry. I was so disconnected from my body, right? So I had to learn how to just understand and get curious about myself and what was going on with me. And I just know I'm at my age and wherever I am in life, I can't show up to anything depleted. That's unacceptable to me now. To not be generous, like what are my values? And one of the big ones is generosity. So I want to have a generous heart. And when I'm exhausted and I'm eating garbage and not moving my body, I don't show up well. It's very simple. But the trauma treatment is not. I mean, it's really about asking about what people, what happened to you, right? What's going on with you, and how might what happened in the past, is that showing up for you now? And it's highly individualized, but it's just some questions and being a good listener and caring about what's going on with people. And we just don't see that energy in the workplace at all.
No, not at all. And in your book, you talk about your inner critic, which is, I love, that's my favorite topic. Can you talk to us a little bit about that chapter?
Yeah, and that's again getting to know yourself. And we all, everyone has one, but for many, many decades of my life, my inner critic was driving the bus. And so I'm from New Jersey, and I like to think of the metaphor as, okay, you're gonna not drive the bus. I'm putting some duct tape around your mouth, and you're going in the trunk. And so you're there, but you're muffled. And so what happens to me is what I notice when I'm about to do something brave or different or hard or difficult, I start to, that voice gets really loud. And I recognize whose it is from my childhood. Who do you think you are? Too big for your britches, all of that. And so it makes me want to be small. So I have got to really interact with that inner critic. It's not shut it down completely, but to say, oh, there's that voice again, very familiar, very old. And we're, you know, it's like a toddler, and I'm just going to steer it towards the trunk and say, you're going to go in here for now and quiet down. So I'm not pushing it down. I'm not burrowing it and pretending it's not there. I'm engaging with it. And that's been such a game changer. Just being aware there's that really negative voice speaking to me in a way that I would never talk to anybody else, you know, in that way and say those words. So that inner dialogue, and that's the mental health piece of it, is really understanding, how are you talking to yourself? How are you showing up for yourself?
Yeah, and that inner critic really prevents you from, like I always say, showing up in the world the way you want to be seen, right? So you said you play small, and if you're playing small, you can't have the impact that you have. So that's why it's so important to, get your inner critic under control. One, acknowledging. So it's all about awareness. What was your favorite chapter? I know this is about you, but what chapter did
Yeah,
you really enjoy
I think
writing and why?
it's a sort of a parenting one. There's definitely one that was the most cringy. This is not the most cringy, although listeners might think it is. When I was taking a parenting class on anger and parenting, right? And so I had a lot of anger problems growing up, you know, in an alcoholic home, and rage really. And so I couldn't understand why my son was making me really angry at night. He wouldn't go to bed. And so I was taking this class. They had us do a worksheet on a common anger problem. And it just kept going down like, why are you angry? Why? Why? Does it match the situation? No, because it was more like rage. It didn't match the situation. So I put the worksheet down and I went to bed. And then a few hours later, I bolted upright in bed, Wendy, and I just realized, oh my God, I'm jealous of my son. He's 8 years old. And I recognized envy, and that he had, so the best thing I could come with was, first of all, a really ugly thing to see, that things came really easy to him. You know, he would just be on all the sports team. He was a great athlete. He was smart. He didn't actually try very hard. All these things came to him. And then really what it was, that, you know, he had a mom like me that was sort of tuned in emotionally. So that was how the healing part of it was, that I had to, and if I couldn't see that, that would have just gone on for decades, you know, for decades. And the fact that I grabbed a hold of that core root, and then I realized my mother was jealous of me, her mother, there was all this conflict. I might have gone back 10 generations and saw, you know, this ugly thing. And without seeing it, you can't really work with it. So that's my favorite chapter. That was the biggest aha, sudden molting, you know, that I had. And a lot of the other stories in the book are slower and more painful. They didn't just happen like sitting upright in bed.
That's amazing. Yeah. So what I'm hearing from you, what is very constant, is self-awareness.
Yeah, yeah. I think that just, yeah, waking up and being aware of our mental state and our physical state, because they're so connected, and not ignoring it. I mean, I think what we often do is we just stuff our feelings down. You know, that's often what leads to burnout and disengagement at work, is that we're doing it to protect ourselves, you know, and so we're just stuffing feelings down, and they come out. The way emotions work, it's going to come out and get you. It'll come out sideways. We're reaching for the Oreos, or we're snapping at someone we love, or binging on TV for 10 hours when we've got other things to do. Like, we're just numbing, and we don't get to decide what end of the spectrum we numb. And so I see so much numbing going on in this pandemic, and this. So if anyone is out there listening and you're suffering, what I call it, over deployment. I don't like the word burnout, but it's, you know, when you feel disengaged, you feel exhausted even after a good night's sleep and a vacation, and you feel like, well, no matter what you do, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference. Those are really the three pillars of burnout, and they're really, really bad for you. They really are, because you have to turn off who you are to walk in that door. You have to turn off, all the things that make you come alive, and there's a deadening inside. And so I really believe, Wendy, I always want to just be hopeful about this, that I think that there is a solution to any problem. There really is a solution to any problem when we focus on it, when we pay attention to it, even if it means accepting the problem. If you've got a loved one battling with an addiction, the solution to that problem is to stop fighting it and to accept it. We don't have to like it, and so I always take my inspiration from a lot of comedians, who are the truth tellers, I feel like, in this society. And Jerry Seinfeld, was a little kid, and 18 years old, working in New York City, and he was noticing that all the older comedians were doing their little shtick and then going to get drunk with the money. And he was like, "How do you build a career from this? I don't understand." And he realized that actually being a comedian is being a writer. So he just started writing like 15 minutes a day, every day of his life, just 15 minutes. And most of it isn't usable. But the idea that there's a solution to every problem by having a system, something in place that you can put in place to solve that problem. And when we focus on solving that problem, and it might be leaving the job, hopefully it's not leaving nursing. There's so many things we can do. I mean, look what the two of us are doing, right? I am a registered nurse, a nurse practitioner with a PhD, and I am running a school of wellness because there was no such thing. There was no place to send people that were stuck in self-defeating behavior. So I know that we need to be much more entrepreneurial and thinking outside the box, and how can we go right to the people where they are hurting and meet their needs directly and jump over this sclerotic ossified healthcare system.
Yes. No, tell us a little more about your school that you
Well,
started.
so I just realized, I was thinking about, I remember sending people to like psych, if they were gaining and gaining weight, going deeper and deeper into metabolic syndrome, and there was no place to send them. So it's like, build what you need. And so it's virtual. And I was thinking about getting a bricks and mortar place, but I have been in, I think, every state in the country during the pandemic doing webinars for all kinds of organizations, everything you can think of. And the idea here is that, why do we have to wait till you're in an ICU to see a really smart nurse? I wanted to go upstream and in the workplace and talk about, resiliency, and how, what we can do, these really basic things, so that we don't go down and get sick just from living our lives. And so I wanted to build something where people could, before they got sick, right? Because we have this perverse healthcare system. It'll pay for the $30,000 cabbage, but not the nutrition consult 10 years before the heart disease sets in. So what we're dying of are illness of distress, the diseases of despair. That's what is really, cardiovascular disease, 13 kinds of cancer. It's all related to our lifestyle, and we just don't have an infrastructure for that in a 15-minute office visit. We just don't. So I work with people. I do individual coaching and lots of webinars and group things. And I help people, if they want to lose 100 pounds, if they need to figure out a career change, whatever that is, whatever is troubling them. And I use a coaching method, and I don't give a lot of advice, but I excavate the truth from individual people. And that's how I work, is that I had to unlearn many of the things I learned in nursing to be a coach. Because we don't.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. People have the answer.
They do.
So I tell people that, all the nurses, who I work with in the mentorship, you have the answer. I'm not really sprinkling any fairy dust, but it's really just, moving through all of that stuff, whatever that is. So you can actually see and feel and live out the answer. So they have the answer. So I love that about coaching as well. That's one reason I became a coach as well. So it's not telling people, it's really helping them discover the answer that they have.
Yeah. And like a big question often is like, what's the fear? What are you afraid of? Because that's what's, that inner critic again is getting loud, and we're not aware of it. And we just listen to it, and really getting specific about what the fear is the game changer.
Now, for someone who's listening, who's feeling burnt out, stressed, what's one thing they could do today to help move them forward?
Well, I guess, creating some white space in their life, like maybe creating a don't list. when you're over deployed, you're often, and if you're feeling any resentment about anybody or anything, you're doing too much. That's what I have come to. There's not many things I'm certain about, but you can actually live a resentment-free life. That is a very corrosive emotion to feel. And so look at where you're feeling resentful and back off. If you don't want to make dinner every night, if you're stuck cleaning the house, working full time, and kids are on video games, they might need some training, but you're doing too much. So create a don't list.
Nice. Thank you so much. And where can people go to connect with you before we get into our rapid fire?
Okay, EileenO'Grady.net is my webpage, and I have a blog I send out less than once a month, and it's pretty edgy. People really like it. It's very short.
Awesome. We'll have to have
Wellness
you
Pearl.
back. I'm sorry, say that again.
It's called a Wellness Pearl, and so it's
Okay.
a short little reminder. Like one of them was on dealing with a-holes and difficult people. That was very popular.
Oh, I have to read that one. I have to read that one. So can I take you through a quick rapid fire?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay. So tell me the first thing that comes to your mind. Wellness means.
Wholeness.
I know I'm stressed when.
My throat tightens.
My go-to stress management solution is.
Yoga.
The last book I read was.
I'm reading it now. I can't remember the title. Well, the one that I loved that I read in 2 days, cover to cover, was Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown.
Ah, yes. Yes, that's a really good
I
book.
recommend it. Yeah.
Yes. And my last question for you is, one thing I learned about myself during this pandemic is.
I learned that I know I'm very subject to other people. There's that emotional contagion. And I learned that I don't want to do that anymore. That I want to be an independent agent of other people's energy or moods. And I didn't see that, but just because, we're with some of the same people all the time or whatever, that was a big revelation for me, and a practice I'm working on is being more independent of other people's moods.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. We will definitely have to have you back and continue this conversation.
Thank you, Wendy. It was great to be here. You're a national treasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.